Have you ever wondered, what do a 19th century novel's protagonist and an anime hero have in common? What is the similarity between the dark student of St. Petersburg and a teenage Japanese anti-hero? To find out, stick around and you'll find out everything you need to know. I'm Johnny Lighthouse, this is the Johnny Lighthouse Show. Today, of course, we are going to talk about one of the most well-known novels of classic Western literature, which is, of course, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which I have in this beautiful Hungarian edition. The video will contain a couple of spoilers, though I believe that both of the stories we are going to address are so well known that nobody will really find any surprise in what I have to say. Let's analyze the protagonist of Crime and Punishment, which is of course Raskolnikov. Now, what matters the most about our protagonist here is his theory that is exposed more or less during the middle of this book. A theory according to which humanity can be split between two types of people. We have on one hand the great men, as they are called, people who can bend morality and law to their own benefit and who are even praised for that. For example, Napoleon, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, or Caesar. People that shape history, people that committed what others would call war crimes or stuff like that, though in the history in the end praised them because they achieved so great deeds that this overshadows anything bad or so-called bad that they could have committed. On the other hand, we have average people like you and me, who live their everyday normal lives without ever even thinking about achieving any deeds like that. People who follow the rules, people who oblige the laws, people who are bound by morality their own, or maybe morality that is set on them by expectations or society, and do not dare to go against the rules. And if they do, they get rightfully punished, and they have no problem with that. Now, the funny thing is that Raskolnikov believes to be a great man because of his extraordinary and true intelligence. He's indeed a very intelligent guy, in fact. That is why he starts to develop this theory of his own, which of course shadows what is, let's say, the original sin, the sin of pride, what makes him think that he's better than anyone else, that he can rightfully take what he needs in order to achieve his great goals. To prove his theory on himself, he decides to kill a despicable old hag, a person that he believes to be completely useless and even harmful to society, which might even be kind of true in a sense, but that is not even the point. The point is that he believes that he can do whatever he deems necessary in order to achieve his goal, given that, of course, he believes to be a great man, akin to Napoleon. He decides then to kill this person, to cleanse the world from a burden to society, for his own benefit, of course, but also for the benefit of the world itself. In a sense, we can consider him as a benefactor. Then, of course, the story ends with him being crushed by the weight of his deed, by the sense of guilt, and in the end he gets arrested and deported to Siberia, where he is forced to labor for long years. But the interesting thing about this whole story is that Raskolnikov never truly repents about his theory. He recognizes his failure, that's true, but the failure is not realizing that his theory was wrong. Instead, he merely realizes that he was mistaken about himself being a great man. In fact, the way he reaches this conclusion is rather interesting. Raskolnikov realizes that a great man would not even question the existence of a rule like this, he would not even think about whether he is a great man or not. So the fact that Raskolnikov took the time, let's say, to wonder whether he is or is not a great man is in fact in itself a proof that he was not a great man. As a consequence, he accepts his rightful punishment as a natural consequence of his deed, but not as a rightful consequence of a wicked action, meaning that he doesn't really believe to have done anything wrong in itself. He only recognizes that he was mistaken about his own nature and that he has to pay the consequence for his misaligned assessment. At the very end of the book, we have to say, there is a sort of a foreshadowing of a redemption ignited by love, though the whole thing is remaining pretty vague. We do not really know what will happen, and for sure it is not put explicitly that Raskolnikov realized his deed was intrinsically wrong. Now let's move to the next part of this video, analyzing the protagonist of a well-known anime that I suppose every viewer has already seen, that is Death Note, and his protagonist Light Yagami. It is my conviction that Light Yagami incarnates the great man ideal of Raskolnikov. He has no moral qualms, he is willing to do anything to pursue his goal. Light, in fact, succeeds where Raskolnikov failed. Raskolnikov tried to prove to the world and to himself that he was a great man, and to do that he killed a person who he believed to be wicked, but is crushed instantly by the guilt. On the other hand, Light commits a series of unspeakable crimes, and never ever is he crushed by guilt or questions the rightfulness of what he has done. In fact, despite this fundamental difference, that is that Raskolnikov proved to be an ordinary man, and on the other hand that Light proved to be a great man in this sense, the two characters have a lot of things in common. Despite the fact that both are young and students, both are very intelligent and have a very high sense of justice, which they want to use to better the world, which is really another way to hide what is their true common point, that is pride. In a similar sense than in the story of Macbeth, written by Shakespeare, or a better well-known example could be Breaking Bad with Walter White, these protagonists do not start off as bad or evil in themselves. They have a good goal, but in order to reach it, they are forced, or they decide to go down a path of increasing violence and wickedness, which will ultimately make them morally repugnant to the viewer, to the reader. Originally sympathetic due to their high ideals, in the end they end up becoming morally repulsive and becoming what they swore to destroy, using Obi-Wan Kenobi's words. In fact, I believe that in order to prove the theory of Raskolnikov wrong, it is not enough to read Crime and Punishment. The perfect representation of the failure of this ideal, of this theory, is presented in fact in Death Note. Because Light Yagami brings forward the theory of Raskolnikov and manages to enact it better than anyone else. Nonetheless, he gets defeated. Not only externally defeated, but also internally defeated. Meaning that even if at the beginning the viewer could kind of resonate with him, in the end he becomes absolutely unbearable. And it is no doubt that he had become the worst criminal in the history of humankind. Having said all of this, let's analyze what is the underlying meaning of these stories. Because of course, Dostoevsky wasn't writing for fun, and also the producers of Death Note did not do something just because they felt like it. They wanted to leave a meaning. They wanted to make the viewer reflect. So what is that we can learn about this? Because it is my deep conviction that we can always learn something deep by reading classic literature, or in this case watching series or movies that have a deep moral reflection in them. I believe that the key word that unites Raskolnikov to Light Yagami is pride. Now, it is funny to think about the fact that there are some vices, or let's call them sins, that in today's world they feel kind of outdated. For example, treason. If someone is condemned for treason or is accused of being a traitor, it feels a little bit out of time. It feels like something that would happen in a movie set in medieval times, not in 2026. Another term like this, another vice, let's say like this, is pride. In fact, I believe that today the concept of pride has even become the opposite of what it used to be, meaning that having pride or being prideful is almost something that is worthy of praise. Whereas if we really think about it, there are some things, of course, of which I believe it's good to be proud in a sense. For example, being proud of your own culture is definitely something that I would say is not a bad thing. But there are other things in which being prideful is definitely not good, like being prideful in the traditional sense. But what does it really mean to be prideful? Being prideful, I believe, could be defined as believing that you have understood everything, that you can do whatever you want because you know best. And there is nothing above you who can judge you. No higher morality, no higher law, or in a religious sense, no God who can judge you or condemn you for your deeds. In other words, it really means that you believe to be a god, or at least the god of yourself, the god of your destiny. Talking about God, I believe it is very interesting that Death Note has a clearly Christian symbolism in it, which can be seen in several parts of the story, starting off with the intro where Light is handed an apple by the Shinigami, the god of death, which of course is a reference to the story of Genesis, where the serpent gives Adam and Eve the fruit of destruction, the fruit of evil, which will ultimately corrupt their soul and make them become the shadow of what they were. Another hint at Christianity can be found in the name itself of Light Yagami, because light could be referring to Lucifer, the fallen angel whose sin was specifically pride, and that is why he was punished. Or, of course, the well-known scene where El washes Light's feet, which has become sort of a meme because, of course, internet is full of gooners, but it is a beautiful scene, which obviously refers to the scene in the Gospels where Jesus washes the feet of Judas, who would betray him soon afterwards. Talking about original sin, in fact, I believe that it is something relevant. It's very interesting that the story of Genesis specifically showcases pride as the origin of all sins. Because, not talking in a specifically religious sense, let's just think about the fact that our forefathers, people who lived 5,000 years ago, pinpointed a very important aspect of human nature. That is that pride is really our original sin. If you think about it, you can recognize that the seed of pride is in the soul of every one of us, to be precise. The belief that we know best, the belief that we can do whatever we want without paying the consequences, the belief that we can get away with our wickedness, that we can cheat, that we can break our own rules without consequence. This is true for every human who ever existed. And that is why pride is the origin of all sins, because once you get into this mindset, it's easy to just start doing more and more wicked things, just as what happened with Raskolnikov or Light Yagami. Though, despite all our efforts, all our delusions, we humans inevitably fall. The story of Light Yagami proves this point. The story of Light Yagami, in fact, highlights the destiny of all those who elevate themselves to the heights of God, showcases the inevitable downfall of idols. Because at the end of the day, let's recognize it, we are no gods. And the more we try to become one, more reality will crush us down, making us fall in the depths of our most basic humanity, making us become what we believed that we could leave behind. But in the process, we will lose our soul. So to end this reflection, to end this video, I would like to leave you with something to think about. I would like to make you reflect on a rather outdated term, just as pride or treason, which is humility. Humility, of course, is the opposite of pride, but what does it really mean? Why is it something valuable? Let's say a virtue, virtuous. Humility means not trying to be always right, not trying to always have an answer to everything, not trying to always know everything, because these are of course impossible. And if we really try to know best, to be always the best, to know everything, we will inevitably fall, because it is just against how reality works. So at the end of the day, I will leave you with this word. Just remember that you're human. Remember humility. Don't try to become something that you will never become. Embrace uncertainty. Listen more, speak less. Don't risk becoming the god of yourself, because after all, we're all mortal, and that's just beautiful. And that's all for now, my friends. That's pretty much all I had to say for today. If you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe, and till next time, my friends.